The book, Viral, The Search for the Origin of COVID-19, and he's been on this show before and told us that it's highly unusual not to have nailed down the origins of a global pandemic 2 years into it. But our politicians and public health experts seem remarkably uninterested in the subject. Matt, I get the feeling, just from reading this Hungarian story, where everything sounds vaguely familiar and yet it's also a new addition to what we know, that there's a lot more of this gain of function going on than we ever knew about before, and that it's kind of wiggled free of the accountable politicians whom one might expect ultimately to be in charge of it.
Well, I agree with you there. I've been following genomics and biology obviously very closely for many years, and I was surprised myself to discover the kind of experiments the virologists have been doing with swapping the genes of viruses, deliberately making them more infectious in the lab so that they're easier to grow in cells. And this is, by the way, the key to the Hungarian story. It's not that they've been fiddling with the DNA of monkeys or hamsters. It's that they've been using cell culture to grow viruses in the lab. Nothing wrong with that. It's a standard technique. The culture you usually use is either a thing called a Vero E6 cell, which originated from African green monkeys, or a Chinese hamster cell, or sometimes a mixture of the two. What's interesting here is that in a sample of soil from Antarctica that was sampled for for genomes of organisms, there popped up SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes the pandemic, and a very early ancestral version of it. Now, this isn't to say that it was sitting in Antarctica. What's happened here is a contamination in the machine that did the sequencing in Shanghai, but we don't quite know when that happened. If it happened in January 2020, which is possible, then it's probably not very interesting. But if it happened in December 2019, before we even knew about the pandemic, then it's very interesting. And what the two Hungarian scientists say is that finding the African green monkey cells and the Chinese hamster cells in the sample suggests that whoever was testing for this virus was testing a laboratory research sample, not a patient sample from a hospital. So it doesn't look like an early case. It looks like something out of a lab. But it's far too early to be absolutely sure, because, as I say, we might find that this was in January and it was related to an early case or something like that. It's just, the Hungarian scientists raised the point themselves. They said this looks like it's come out of a research experiment.
Do you know yet why it is that on the Western end of things, particularly with the Americans, why they would be so eager to do gain-of-function research in this particular field in China? I mean, I know China is where coronaviruses come from, but they come along, they're like the number 22 bus. You wait a while and there hasn't been one, but then 12 show up all at once. So why are the actual coronaviruses not sufficient for them that the Americans would want to be doing gain-of-function research?
Well, it's quite interesting that SARS-like viruses can't be found in the Americas. They're only in horseshoe bats. Horseshoe bats don't live in the Americas. So the place you have to go to study the SARS-like viruses in particular is China and Southeast Asia, but Africa would do as well. And so the American coronavirus experts were reliant on the Chinese to sort of send them information about the genomes they were finding at one point. And they then, through the EcoHealth Alliance, which is a private foundation, the American government funded research projects in China itself. It's pretty odd, this, because they didn't get any ownership of the results. They don't have the right to see the genomes of the viruses that were found, which is truly remarkable. No. If you're paying for the research, you should be able to see the results. But they're secret possession of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Wuhan was the center of this stuff. I mean, Wuhan was by far the biggest research center for SARS-like coronaviruses in the world, not just in China. So it's a bit like, you know, that old line from Casablanca, you know, of all the gin joints in all the world, in all the towns in all the world, she walks in a mine.